John and hand it over to him. And I hope that you all will be able to hear him. John, do you want to say something real quick to
Yeah,
make
can
sure we
everybody
can
hear
hear?
me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. So John Bennett is an assistant professor of public administration in the Department of Political Science and Public Affairs at Savannah State University, a position he has held since 2022. He previously taught as an adjunct professor in the public administration and organizational leadership programs at Valdosta State University for 10 years, while working in the public sector as a nonprofit executive and consultant. Bennett spent 16 years at the Savannah College of Art and Design, where he served as a founding director of SCAD's Student Media Center and in other positions. He has also worked as a journalist and in media relations. He holds a Master of Science degree in Higher Education Student Affairs, a Master of Arts degree in Historic Preservation, and a doctorate in Public Administration. John, I'm handing it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. I also am involved with the United Way, and that's how I met Nola, and that's how she extended this invitation today. I told Nola before we started I struggled a bit because I do teach a class in grant writing, and it was difficult to think about how to take 15 weeks worth of classes and put them into 45 minutes. So what I'll share with you today are just some things I picked up along the way as a practitioner. And more recently, I frequently invite people to my classes to share their expertise and things I've picked up from working professionals who are actively writing grants now. The other thing that I do need to mention is that it is difficult to talk about grant writing in May 2025. As many of you know, there have been major cataclysmic shifts in grant funding at the federal level. And we're really dealing in it with an hour-by-hour basis. So I don't mean to be political in anything I say, but we have to acknowledge that a lot of the things that we will be dealing with, especially when it comes with federal funding, are changing very rapidly. So a very basic question that some of you, probably all of you know about, what is a grant? So I will talk about some characteristics that I think are present. It's usually distributed as money, right? It's funding, but it could also be equipment, facilities, other things that are in-kind grants. It's provided for a specific purpose. So when you're writing a grant, you're talking about what you plan to do. It is described in detailed application instructions. And those of you who have been actively writing grants have seen those and navigated those. And we'll talk a little bit about how important those are. There is usually a competitive selection process, right? So when you submit a grant, you have the expectation that other people have too, and that you will be competing against them to be a finalist and then a recipient of the grant. And it's sometimes subject to very rigorous reporting requirements. Those of you who administer grants or have before know that some require quite a bit of data collection and reporting responsibilities, and that's something you'll have to weigh when you decide whether to apply or not. Frankly, whether you have the capacity to do the kind of reporting the grant requires. And remember, the grants are intended to solve a problem or improve conditions in a certain area. And finally, they are a linear life cycle, right? A 1-year grant, a 2-year grant. Some grants are recurring. Sometimes grants are one time only. So it is fixed in time. So those are the dimensions we think about when we talk about a grant. And when we talk about who gets grants, everything from grassroots organizations, this could be a neighborhood association, social service organizations. Many of you represented here today are working with social service organizations, advocacy organizations that are active in trying to advance a particular cause, state and local governments, schools and universities, and individuals. And when we're talking about individuals, those could be, for example, an artist who receives a grant. So who are the grants? What are the sources? Who gives the grants? Private foundations, community foundations, corporations, and governments at all levels are active in giving grants to organizations. And I'll say here too, if you have a question or if you want me to stop along the way, please do so. And Nola, if you could keep an eye on the chat and see if there's anything there. So we're talking again about who gives grants at the national level. Obviously, the federal government gives grants. And as we said at the introduction, there are massive changes happening there. The state of Georgia does give grants as well. And of course, grants can be administered locally. For example, the city of Savannah's Community Partnership Program. And then there are foundations, both related to corporations and independent foundations as well. If we think about that same scheme locally, we can think about local service organizations that give grants. even neighborhood associations, the community foundations, and of course, organizations like the United Way are all actively giving grants. So people ask, well, where do you find grants? And there are lots of good sources out there. I'm not going to go too deeply in this. And again, looking at grants.gov, where you go for federal grants, recognize that things are changing very rapidly there. There are subscription services that allow you to search for grants. I would advise people to think strongly about paying for those services until you can determine if it's there, the value is actually there for you. So the main question I tell people to ask before applying is, before you do anything else, is answer this question. Ready? Are you eligible to receive the grant? So this should be listed in the grant instructions. So it may be restricted geographically, it may be restricted to type of organization. So the first step is to determine, are we actually eligible to receive this grant? So I've had students find grants that talk about the Savannah Valley region, and they go, oh, it's got Savannah River in there. That means it's for us, but it's a grant that's restricted, for example, to Augusta. So it could be a geographic restriction, but the key thing, are you even eligible to receive the grant? The next question I tell people to ask themselves are, can we do it? Is this grant something that your organization actually has the capacity to pull off? Do you have the personnel? Do you have the expertise? Do you have the infrastructure to not only apply for, but administer this sort of grant? So those are two main questions. Others to ask is this grant, is it fit
John,
with our mission? Yes.
sorry, if you're trying to move the slides, they're not moving.
Oh, they're not. Not, what's the last one you saw?
We're still on the intro slide, and everybody else trusts we did do a tech check.
Yeah, we
But
did.
as you know, we live in a very tech heavy world, and so can't live with it, can't live without
Okay,
it.
I'm gonna stop sharing and reshare. That's the only, wait a minute. It says my screen is paused.
We don't see that. We're just on your intro slide. Okay, now now you're not sharing if you want to reshare.
Okay. We did this before, I promise.
And everything worked.
Better?
Now we're on slide 4.
Okay. And now I can't advance the slides. Perfect.
Yep, we're on the calendar now.
Okay. All right, I'll just have to do this. So the big questions to ask are you eligible to receive the grant? Can you do the grant? Is it advancing, Nola?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't see it now. So I've got, hold on one second. Okay, I think I'm on track now. So what do you see?
Who gets grants? Who gives grants?
Okay, still, can you still see it?
Yes.
Okay. Now I can't again.
You can go back if that's how you see it.
So which slide do you see, Nola?
Who gets grants? Who gives grants? But we saw it
Okay.
in the other view as well, if you need to go back to that to see the PowerPoint.
Okay, I'm gonna go, what do you see now?
Who gives grants? And
Circles?
yes, circles.
Okay, so we talked about this, the different organizations that provide grants both locally and nationally, places to look for them. So the big questions are we eligible to receive the grant, and can we do it? Do we have the capacity? Are we still moving, Nola?
Yes.
Okay, so the big question is that I ask people to think about is mission creep. In other words, does this grant represent a major change in direction for our organization? So, for example, if our organization is working with older people, and then we start looking at grants for after-school programs for young people, it could indicate an expansion of programs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we need to make sure that as organizations, we're mission-driven and not grant-driven. And that means we're not chasing the money, going after money just because it's out there, thinking about how we can use it. It's important to recognize that many times these grants are given to start new programs. So you want to make sure that this program is not, or this grant isn't tempting you to launch a program or initiative that you might not otherwise. So before applying, always do your homework. And the first step is to read the grant instructions. And the next step is to read the grant's instructions again. And you can research the organization that's giving the grant, see what they funded in the past, see if their organizations, often they'll post those on their websites. For some foundations, they do not have a lot of visibility on their website. So when you're dealing with a foundation, you might request a copy of their annual report or just call them up. And this is an important part. When you're in doubt, if you have questions, ask. So grant program officers and people at these organizations, if they have the capacity, will entertain your questions and we'll try to find answers for you. And that's part of a long-term relationship you'll want to establish with funders. So again, we're talking about May 2025, and it's important to note that in federal grant making right now, the landscape is changing rapidly. So the thing to remember about federal grants, they are similar to other grants, but they are different because the terms and conditions and recipients, method of award are all part of legislation. And that's one of the problems we're dealing with now. This funding that some of the federal grant funding that's been withdrawn was part of legislation that's passed by Congress. And so that's why we're seeing both a battle happening between organizations that are having their grants withdrawn, and lawsuits are happening left and right. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. So one of the questions you want to ask is, why would a grant maker give money to a project? What is it about what you want to do that can make them interested or intrigued? So they want to give money where the need is greatest. So this is something you need to know about the community you're working in. What are the demographics? What are the needs? What are the issues that need to be addressed? And as a grant writer, you need to know these things in detail. So when we're talking about identifying and documenting needs, we're really asking this question: what problem will a grant address? And some people don't like to use the word problem. So what opportunities could this grant provide, for example, might be another word or another way to phrase that. So here's something that we all have to realize if we're writing grants, even if it's a small grant, we have to realize that we're competing with other organizations that have carefully documented their needs or the needs of their community by using a variety of different measures. So we have to help the grantors see what's important about our grant application and what we aim to do. So two ways to do this are through target populations. So who are you serving with your grant? It could be people in a geographic area. It could be members of a demographic group, or both. Who will be served? And then it's also sometimes useful to provide context. So if there is a major issue that is gaining national attention, you may be able to tap into some of that research, talk about what the trends are, and then start zooming in, tighten the focus so that it's local. How is this national issue playing out here, and how would your grant be related to that? So you really have to think about it this way. Put yourselves in the shoes of the person who will be evaluating all the grants that come into an application. They have to you have to convince them to carry your grant application forward. You have to give them the confidence, and when they present your grant to a panel or a board or whoever makes the decision, you want them to know that, or you want to have that person going into that meeting knowing that they believe in what you're trying to do. So that's the person you're trying to convince, and you should think about what would help them make that decision. So some of the things you may want to aim to convey in your application, you have to be certain that yes, the grant instructions, the guidelines specify that the grant should serve this population, and indeed the population we're talking about is eligible. Here's the data that demonstrates that we have a problem and in its extent. Demonstrate your understanding that you've seen. You are knowledgeable in the theories and practices that have been used in other places. You know especially what's worked in some places or what has not worked, and explain why your project or your program is different, even if there's similar ones in the same community or working in the same space. What makes your solution needed at this time. So a warning, there is sometimes a temptation to just get mountains of research, statistics, and other documentation. Um, and that can overwhelm your grant officer. And that's why sometimes there are character limits and grant applications and so forth. So be able to convey the research and what you've learned, but make sure you're not overwhelming the person who's on the other end of the application process. So in trying to find information that can be used to document need, some of you have probably worked with census data before. Cities and counties collect data. Of course, universities do research and publish studies. Other nonprofits may do research and publish their studies. School records, public safety and crime statistics, health department information, and media coverage of an area can all be used to demonstrate that there is a need for what you're trying to do. And locally, I guess going from the national level, again, some of you have worked with census data before. Some of you have probably used SAGES, which is a very powerful tool for local mapping. And of course, organizations like the Coastal Georgia Indicators Coalition also provide data that may be useful in helping you to identify and demonstrate needs for the project that you are advancing. So there are more specialized types of data recovery and data dashboards. And one I'll mention is one that I've worked with a lot in the past. Georgia Department of Transportation offers a crash data dashboard. So if you're saying, for example, writing a grant to improve pedestrian safety or do traffic calming, you'd like to be able to tell how many serious fatal crashes happened at a particular intersection or a stretch of roadway, for example. And this is a more specialized type of data dashboard that would help you. And there may be similar products that exist in your field as well. So the other source of data that you can use is data that your organization may be collecting. So if you're doing surveys of people who participate in your programs, if you're conducting focus groups or doing open houses, or doing surveys just out on the street, if you're interviewing people, if you're visiting sites, if you're doing audio or a photo or video documentation, if you're creating mapping, all of those are data collection activities that your organization may be actively involved in that can help you demonstrate that need. It is also important sometimes to underpin this with scientific research in your field. And so we often call this the literature. So those of you who have written papers in college or graduate school know about a literature review, right? Finding out what's out there, finding out what the best practices are, what scientific and social science research has revealed. So these being up to date is very important. But again, you're not writing a thesis or dissertation, but you need to be well versed in the latest research or literature in your field. And this also has a secondary advantage. It will provide you the opportunities to know about best practices. So perhaps a model program that's being used in another community that you could adapt and use locally. So it's good all around. I'll give you an example. Does anybody know where this picture is taken? So this is the Habersham Village Shopping Center. And I took this yesterday afternoon. Can anybody identify the marking on the pavement there? Does anybody know what that represents? Has anybody seen this before?
Bicycle lane.
Yeah, so this is what's called a shared lane pavement marking, also known as a sharrow. And this is intended to indicate that a bicycle is what direction the bicycle should move in and where the bicycle rider should be positioned in the lane. And it comes from a federal document that's published every, I guess, 10 years, probably, called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So here's an example of the literature in the field. So let's imagine that we're writing a grant to provide funding to put more sharrows down to help people know that bicycles should travel in a certain direction and should be in a certain position on the pavement. So we'll study the literature. So we found a study about advancing healthy cities through safer cycling and examination of shared lane pavement markings. So if we delve into this, we determined that a key thing here, blocks with only sharrows installed experience the largest increase in bicycle injury rates. So the outcome of this is putting down these pavement markings actually makes streets less safe. So if you were advocating for a grant to fund this, the reviewer might say, wait a minute, that has been a disproven safety countermeasure. So you want to make sure that you're up to date on the research on your field, especially if you're proposing interventions or different types of activities. You want to make sure that they are supported by data that says they are effective and do what you want them to do. So it's also a good idea to read the professional publications in your field. So to keep up with this research, but also sometimes these publications also provide lists of available grants. So that data component is very necessary because it does demonstrate the need. But the real question is, what really makes a grant application sing? What would make a reviewer really buy into it and want to carry it forward? And that's oftentimes what you try to accomplish through the narrative section of a grant application. So you really want to talk about who will be helped by the grant, why this grant is important, what is the immediate impact, what are the results that we'll begin to see almost instantly, what would be the long-term result? Can this grant instigate a generational change in a neighborhood or community? Why is your grant idea, why is your project the best way to do it? And why is your organization best suited to undertake this project? So again, you've provided the data, but now's the point where you start selling your organization and your approach to the situation as best suited to accomplish the goal. You want to present your project as a model. You want to address, well, let's talk about that for a second. One of the best things could happen to you as a grant recipient is that if your project or your program is so successful, it becomes a model. And that's helpful for you to say, hey, what we did here in Savannah, Georgia is now being used all over the state of the Georgia or all over the country. That's bragging rights for you, right, as your organization, but also very important for you to realize that your grantor will also be telling that story to say, we funded a grant in Savannah, Georgia that eventually became a nationwide model. So you want to make sure that you're presenting your grant as an opportunity potentially to have a model program. You want to make sure that you're addressing the priorities that the funder has identified. And you really want to think ahead. Why, how will these results be useful? Can they be replicated? Can they be modified? What can be done with them in the future? So all of this is sometimes difficult to express. And an example that someone provided to me is, imagine we have a program that deals with healthy food, right? And so we've got community gardens and we've got healthy cooking classes. Well, we can tell the grantor that in the past, when we've run this program before, 44 people participated, or however many number of people came through the program. And that's an important statistic. But what could really make the difference is an interview with someone who says, I became involved in the program. I learned about healthy eating, and I was previously on X number of medications for chronic conditions. And let me tell you about the time that my doctor said we can take you off the last one of those medications. So if there's an opportunity in a grant process to have a compelling story like that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be words. If there's an opportunity, it could be a photograph. So one of the most compelling images that a grant reviewer told me that they had seen was a child's drawing of what she wanted her community to look like, which was included in a grant application, and it really conveyed the message. So again, we want this strong set of data and research backed by the voices of people who can be helped by the program. So it's kind of a combination of the two. So let's talk a little bit about how to collaborate. Why would you want to write grants with other people? What are the advantages therein of a collaborative grant writing process and grant administrator process with more than one organization involved? So when we're talking about collaboration between organizations on grants, it means that organizations and individuals have to leave their egos at the door. It means being honest and keeping an open mind. And it means sometimes supporting the best solution, even if it does not benefit every partner. So maybe this isn't an opportunity that you will get to take part in as part of a collaborative grant writing effort, but there are advantages down the road. So that's what true collaboration means. So why this is important increasingly for grantors. they know a number of things. If you have more people involved, more organizations involved, that's more people who are going to promote, recruit, publicize, and evangelize. You've spread ownership over a greater number of people and a greater number of organizations. It also helps if one of the organizations involved encounters problems, the partners can probably or may be able to keep the project going. So it's about capacity, capability, and sustainability, thinking about maybe your organization does not have the capacity or their expertise to be part of a grant, but in partnering with another organization that does work in that space, you're able to do that. And again, sustainability is a big part of almost every grant application. So you can expect to see questions that ask, what will happen if this grant funding is no longer available? How will the project be sustained? And that question is much more prevalent these days than ever before. So we know that sometimes collaboration can be different. We may have goals and expectations and responsibilities. Our partner organizations may have drastically different approaches, but are also very successful. And this can make it difficult, especially if we are used to using a model or way of solving problems that have worked for us in the past. It can be scary to try new things. So how do you demonstrate a true collaborative effort? It's true that sometimes grant writers can determine or can sense that a collaboration, it's maybe a collaboration of convenience just for this grant. So you want to demonstrate that you probably have, or at least start demonstrating that you've worked with other organizations in the past, and you can document this with meeting agendas, minutes. You can establish letters of commitment or MOUs between organizations, and you can get people to write letters supporting what you're trying to do. And especially if those are people who are prominent or have a large degree of credibility, those may be super important. And again, this is important because reviewers can detect when a collaboration has been cobbled together. And it really has to establish, if you're doing something collaboratively, that each partner's activities, roles, and responsibilities are equal, that they're all treated as equal partners in the effort. So it is sometimes difficult for us to share funding between other organizations, especially if there's an opportunity perhaps where we could have received all the funding ourselves. But if you're able to establish these partnerships between organizations that you work with over the long term, even if someone else becomes the lead organization, receives the majority of the funding on one grant, there may be other opportunities down the road for you to move into that position. So I'm trying to advocate for having long-term collaborations, not just with other nonprofits, but with government organizations and with other types of organizations that can help you not just go over after grants that you might not be able to do yourself, but also to have a network of other organizations that are looking out for you. So one question that's often answered is, do I have to answer all those grant questions on the application? And the answer is yes. If there's a question there, you do have to answer it with the exception of something that is just truly not applicable to or your organization. So it is important to do that. Those of you who have written lots of grants probably have a file with all the things that you're always going to need for a grant, right? So that you always have them ready to go. These are components that we can expect to see in just about every application. So your IRS designation letter, your mission, vision, bylaws, your list of employees, your organizational chart, your board members, past grants received. And this is often asked in part of the application process, as many of you know, where you're able to say, yes, we've received this grant in the past, or we've received funding for these organizations. And that signals to the grantor or funder that, yes, other people have found this organization worthy of investment or funding in the past. So that will boost their confidence in choosing you. Letters of support that your organization has received, media coverage of your organization, and then an organizational chart. So again, those of you who have done this before probably have a file on your desktop where you keep all this stuff. So once you get in the business of going after grants, you will use these materials again and again. A question about, or some discussion about why grants fail. And some of the key indicators we see are missed deadlines. When a grant says it must be submitted by this day, that's the deadline to support. We haven't talked about the administration of grants. I mentioned reporting earlier, but missing any kind of deadline can not only prevent you receiving the grant, but can cause problems in continuation of the grant if you're currently receiving. Weak methodology, if the way you've presented your goals and objectives, you've demonstrated demonstrated the need is a little bit shaky, or there's not a lot there, that can help you. If you ignore or disregard or don't follow the guidelines, that can happen. That can cause your grant to be dismissed. If your budget is unrealistic, and unrealistic in either direction. So if your budget is clearly not sufficient to fund the type of project you're proposing, or if it's exorbitant and you're clearly padding the budget, those can get your grant removed from consideration. Lack of innovation. Again, grantors are looking for bold new solutions to problems. So if you're proposing, especially something that has been proven to be not as successful in the past, that can cause you problems. If your grant fails a basic cost benefit analysis, if it's out of line with the priorities that the funding organization has advanced, if it's poorly written or you didn't complete it, those are all opportunities for your grant to be removed from consideration. And as I mentioned earlier, we can expect that every grant we apply for will be competitive. There'll be a lot of people going after the same thing we are. So as much as they may like your program, as much as they may believe in your cause, the grant program manager may be just looking for something to thin down that pile, even if it's just a technicality, and nobody wants to go out on a technicality. So that's some general reasons why grants fail, but it's also important to recognize that we can learn from our failures, right? And especially if you've been able to develop a good working relationship with this funder, they may be able to tell you, hey, let us know, is it possible for you to tell us what really counted against us? Sometimes you'll get scoring back on your application, and that's tremendously helpful, but you may need to ask these questions. What could we do next time? And they may be able to tell you, if you want to apply for this again, here's what would strengthen your application. And again, if you establish that good working relationship, if you send the thank you note after you didn't get the grant, that establishes you as a pragmatic organization that recognizes that you can do better. And again, it may result in the invitation to apply next year, or it may, in some cases, have that grant program officer say, hey, you didn't do so well with us, but here's another grant that might be worthy of your attention. So again, it's about establishing those relationships. And so even when we don't get a grant, or perhaps especially when we don't get the grant, that's when we have a lot of opportunity for learning. So here's one fact. 100% of grants that are not submitted will not receive funding. So if you don't, if you're worried about whether you should apply or not, whether you'll get it or not, well, if you don't apply, it's 100% certain that you will not receive the grant. So again, choose wisely, make sure you're going after grants that you are eligible to receive, that you're capable of producing, but the ones that you think will work for you and your organization that support your mission, go after them, is what I say. So again, let's talk a little bit about where we are in May 2025, a situation that's changing hourly. So this morning, I found these headlines within the last 24 hours all over the United States, especially with federal funding. We are seeing organizations scrambling to try to figure out what to do. Either they're worried their federal grants are going to be canceled, or already have. So this is a definite concern. And as all of you probably know, it's happening here locally. So one of the biggest stories was the $30 million grant that the city of Savannah had for drainage improvements. It's starting to work its way into potentially causing problems for libraries and museums. Local children advocacy organizations, so CASA and others, have had these problems. Libraries, and so it's happening here in Savannah and all over the coast. Maybe some of you here today are dealing with this, but it is something that we have to be very, very careful to monitor on a minute by minute basis almost. So there are things happening. There are lawsuits advancing through the courts. Again, many of them based on the question that this funding was allocated by Congress and is part of legislation, and so therefore cannot be arbitrarily withdrawn. And then another thing we're happening is seeing that some foundations are trying to step in into the breach and to provide some funding, at least in the short term. So let's talk briefly. I think I'm running out of time, but you can find this information on the Council on Foundations website. So the word foundation doesn't really have a precise legal meaning, but we know that there are private foundations, and then they're public charities, and those are different things. And the IRS does classify foundations as being private, but not much legal capacity or not much legal description happens after that. We have independent foundations, we have family foundations, we have corporate foundations, there are international foundations and other types. So this may be a new source of funding that many nonprofits turn to, especially if federal grants continue to be withdrawn or defunded. So recognize there will be much more competition if foundations are able to step up to the plate. So remember, I asked, do you have to answer all those grant applications? And again, the short answer is yes. And then the other question is, do I have to answer all of your questions? And the short answer is yes. So if you have any questions, I will entertain them at this time. And at any time, this is my contact information. So if I can be of assistance to you, I would certainly do my best to help you if I can. So Nola, I guess do we how much more time for questions? Did I go over? Tell me
Thank
what
you,
we.
John. No, we actually have 20 minutes for questions. So I know that was a lot of information, especially depending on where you are in the life cycle of your nonprofit or even with applying for grants. But any questions you might have, there are no silly questions, please ask. Well, while we are giving
Well,
people
I do.
thinking time, oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, John, for this
Oh,
information.
you're welcome.
It very helpful, and some of the things we do currently um uh utilize now in terms of resources in the process of collecting or looking for grants. My major question, could you elaborate a little bit on the lack of innovation? Because we have had that particular problem with one grant that we applied for. But the level of innovation they wanted was a level of innovation that our organization didn't have capacity to achieve at that time. So essentially, we made the decision that that grant wasn't for us, which is what you have to do with any grant.
Mhm.
Um, but sometimes just that phrase of this needs to be more innovative, like it can be so broad. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, can you give any advice in terms of like, I do understand having additional or new, more modern or different types of approach to a problem versus the traditional steps that maybe organizations have taken in the past to help solve a problem. For instance, like our organization works with single moms. What are the ways can you help low income single moms in a way that is effective and has long term change? Like we have done that before, looked at different ways, but in terms of what a funder would want to see and on a level of innovation, like I would just be more interested in hearing how we could improve in an area where maybe we're not as innovative as we think we are.
Well, the answer to your question is no, I have no idea. No, just yeah. I will say this. I mean, what you've described is one of the most frustrating things about this. And so
Yeah,
programs like yours that are well respected and proven to deliver results, it's almost like you won't fund us for this thing we know works and we've
right,
demonstrated year after year we can do. You want us to come up with something completely new that's untested. And so it
right.
is very frustrating that, those of us who have applied for and reviewed grants know that again they're often weighted heavily to let's do something new, let's do something.
Yeah,
And again,
yeah,
that it's important to develop new strategies, new approaches, especially if those can be modified in other communities, expanded upon. But it's truly very frustrating, and you have to
yeah,
make a difficult decision, as you described, sometimes to say it's just not for us, we can't do it. And so I don't know that I have a specific answer to your question, but one thing that might be helpful and that I've had is to look and talk with people who are maybe working in similar but not the exact same space you are, to say, tell us about how you work and how your programs work, and see if there are potential strategies or approaches from aligned but not your same field that might
Mm-hmm.
be adapted. And then the other thing that I think is potentially useful is to really localize it, to say, is there a particular situation in Savannah, Georgia, a particular set of circumstances that really could allow us to do something unique? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's the ability to locate services within a particular facility. Maybe it's to address a particular advantage that we might have that other communities don't. So again, maybe, I mean, my first answer was just maybe have a different set of eyes from
Mm-hmm.
a different type of organization, you know,
Mm-hmm.
see how they would look at it, knowing what, and their viewpoint may be informed by, the research they read, what their colleagues in other cities are doing. So it might
Right.
reveal something that would not be apparent to you, that is both innovative and within your capacity to produce. And the other is to think about something we have here in Savannah that people don't have, or a situation that
Mhm.
that provides an opportunity to do something different. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, it's very helpful. I mean, all the things in terms of higher level innovation, or like even the big vision or big picture for our organization, like all those things are there. That latter part that you mentioned, having the capacity to do
Mhm.
that right now is
Yeah,
not realistic, and
yeah,
trying to make a leap like that doesn't
yeah,
help the sustainability of the organization. So, but yeah, I do think if we can figure out like the latter part, building capacity in order to like meet these higher expectations of innovation, because like the plans that we had were great, like it was a phenomenal like thing they wanted us to do, and we wanted to do it, but when we really looked at the numbers and what it
yeah.
would take to do it, it was like this would like crumble us if
Right.
we took a leap like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to get another grant to fund this grant.
Right,
So
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. But
and
no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
yeah, it is tempting, and I mean it's almost heartbreaking in a way to be able
It
to
was heartbeaking. Exactly. It was
uh and
heartbreaking.
and in these times, I mean, I know that you feel the pressure, and everybody in this session feels the pressure to find income, to find sources of revenue, to
Mhm.
diversify the revenue. So, I mean, if anything is even, seems to be even a little bit compatible, or if there is potential there, you hate not to go after it. But again,
Right.
it does put you have to be the good steward of the organization, like you're explaining and like you're doing.
Yeah. And that was the hard part. Like the first year or two probably would have been great. And then like again, the sustainability just
Yeah.
wasn't there.
Yeah.
So but yeah, no. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
So we have two questions in the chat. And again,
Okay.
if you ask this question and I'm not getting it right, please feel free to unmute yourself. The first question is, where can we go to learn more about grant writing? And I'm assuming you're referencing the technical aspect of grant writing. So that is one question we have. Or how can a person learn more about grant writing?
Okay, well, the number one way that most experts approve is taking my class, and it'll be offered again in the fall. No, I'm kidding, or in the spring. There are a number of resources available. The Georgia Center for Nonprofits. There are all types of organizations out there that provide information. So the technical aspects, I would look for organizations in your field, perhaps. So again, I did a lot of work in bicycle and pedestrian um, crash and safety areas, and looking for organizations, professional organizations, advocacy organizations often provide guidance for a particular type of grant. But again, things like the Georgia Center for Nonprofits, I would also the United Way and the resources it provides. are all great ways to do it. There are a lot out there. The one thing I would urge people to do, they're obviously they're professional grant writers, right? People who make money doing this and are great at it, and I have tremendous amounts of respect for them. There are also websites out there that purport to give you access to grants or purport the grants that are paid subscription services. But I would first turn to those other nonprofits that are in the business of helping people understand this. I don't know if I answered the question correctly or not. If the person who had the question wants to email me, I can send some links, perhaps would be helpful.
I'm also going to send our nonprofit HQ webpage. I dropped that before, but I'll drop it again. Essentially, it covers references for everything, and sources that help you with all these questions that you all may have, from budgets to board best practices to grant writing. We also have some recorded Georgia Center for Nonprofit workshops on there. So dropping the link now, please explore it, dig into it. And then the next question we have is,
Can I do one more plug? We do
Yes.
here in our program at Savannah State offer a graduate assistant in nonprofit management and leadership. So if anybody's interested in that, that's a whole suite of courses that we offer at the graduate level that exists within the Master of Public Administration program, but some people just come in for that certificate. So I just want to put out that that's available too. And if anybody has questions, I can answer them for it. Just email me, I guess. Okay, sorry, no, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Thank you. The next question in the chat is, what are the expectations regarding citing sources in a proposal? Do folks typically use a third-party service for the reference section?
That's a great question, and I confess that I don't know the exact answer to that. I think it depends on the level of the grant. So if it's a very detailed federal grant, yes, they're going to look into every source you cited, and it will be necessary to make sure that everything is correct. If it's a lower level grant from a regional or local authority or local government, they'll try their best to ascertain, or they will ascertain, whether the data or the sources that you're citing are correct, but it won't be the same level of scrutiny. So I guess I'd answer the question by saying it depends. Depends on, again, how complicated, how detailed the grant is, and how high their expectations are for you to document and to cite every source that you list in the application. So that's probably not a very good answer. So it depends is never a good answer, right?
Just one thing I want to say real quick as folks are formulating other questions is, thank you so much, Dr. Bennett. I really appreciate the time that you took to condense your course into 45 minutes. And this is just one aspect of grants, but is the most important one. And you touched on a lot of different things that I have seen folks struggle through, no matter how established they are or not. And the one thing that I really want to reiterate is that at the end of the day, grants are all about relationships. Whether that's building a relationship with the grantor, even if you've already received grants from them, you cultivate and you continue that relationship, or if it's a new grant, you're established, you're not, cultivate that relationship, but also cultivate the relationship with your target population. If we're talking about new grants, whether that's a new project or a new nonprofit, a lot of this can get abstract. You can get sucked into the weeds, but you've got to cultivate the relationship with the folks that you say you're going to serve. And that looks different for everybody. But putting into place this abstract idea of what you plan to do, but you don't actually even know if it's going to work, or the folks that you've identified even want or need it, that's very important. And then the last thing I want to say is, you've got to have systems in place to keep the grant. The worst thing you can do is not get stuck and afraid of applying for a grant or not even get it, is to get a grant and lose it because you did not do what they asked you to do. You are signing a contract with that. You do not want to get in a situation where you received money from a funder, you lost it for whatever those reasons looked like, and then you need that money again in the future, and they may not give it to you because you were dinged for whatever the reasons are. You've got to have systems in place. And it goes back to what Jennifer mentioned before. If you don't have the capacity, you either have to pivot or just decide that that is not for you at that time. So I just want to state those
Those are
facts.
great points. And Nola, I was thinking about that too, because, if you're having trouble with a grant, if you have that good relationship with the grantor and you say, hey, listen, we're encountering a little problem right now. We've lost a staff member, something else has happened. Believe me when I tell you, the people that are giving you money want you to succeed, right? They wouldn't have funded your project if they didn't believe in it, if they didn't believe in its capacity, if they didn't believe in you and an organization. So I would urge people, if you're encountering trouble or having problems, be honest and forthright with your funder and let them know what's happening, because they want you to succeed. They don't want to be in the position of it's gone too far now and it's too late. There's nothing that can be done to salvage it. So I would echo that comment. And also, you're just exactly right on the money. You cannot propose a successful grant if you have not involved the people who it would serve in its development everywhere along the way. So we often have ideas of what we think will be successful to help people in a particular area, but as you so perfectly described, if they're not involved in the process, if we're not talking to them, if we don't have that relationship, we're going to fail.
And just one last thing I want to say before we get off. We are in some what can feel like scary times right now. I know John sent you all those, showed you all those headlines.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be, we just got to be
No.
honest about what's happening.
Yes, while we're grounded ourselves in reality, the one silver lining that I see from this is that it's going to force a lot of us to start coalition building and collaborating. Whether that means that you're going into a grant with a partner agency, maybe you're not seeking that grant out on your own. Maybe you're doing it with another organization that either has a similar mission or they have a service that you can provide, which can enhance your capacity. That means that you may not necessarily get every single coin that you want to budget for, but it means that you have a higher chance of getting it. I cannot say enough. Grants are competitive in nature, and even more so they are now. This is not just the federal level, as John pointed out. It has a ripple effect with the foundations. A lot of us are trying to step up and fill that gap, but it is a huge gap we're trying to fill. So please, please, please collaborate, whether that looks like fiscal sponsorship or going in on a grant together, or just coordinating your services better with those other organizations. So
And Nola, I'll chime in just a little bit. I'm sorry I'm off camera, y'all. It's been a weekend, a work weekend. But I do want to say, Shelter from the Rain has always had to function without federal funding. So I think a lot of people are entering into this world where you do have to think more creatively about funding, which we've always had to do. So this is not new for us. But I will say what you just said, Nola, is 150% accurate. But it's a good thing. It's like, it's not a negative thing. Like, it has forced us in a very positive way to create strategic partnerships with like the Front Porch. That's where our diaper bank is located. They offer several services to at-risk youth, but then our services are also there to serve those families. And then our families also have access to the services that they have. So it's a very powerful partnership. And a lot of that is because, we had services that they didn't provide and they had services that we don't provide. And then also, like you said, talking about being the subrecipient of grants, that's also it's actually better because you don't have to be responsible for the 100% reporting that has to happen. So like, I just wanted to highlight again, silver linings with situations like this. Very beautiful partnerships can come out of situations like that.
Thank you, Jennifer. And honestly, I will end on that note unless anyone else has anything to say. John has his information. Please screenshot it or write it down. I'll send the PowerPoints out. This recording will be uploaded into the web page that I dropped in the chat, Nonprofit HQ. Please go to Nonprofit HQ and check it out. These are not formal endorsements of other organizations, but these are the organizations or resources that we found that are low cost or no cost. And they have wonderful examples, whether that's webinars, recordings, books, or examples of proposals, budgets, even questionnaires if you need to know if you're grant ready or if you're even ready to launch your nonprofit. So take some time educating yourself with those resources. And thank you so much for spending your lunch with us. Thank you again, Dr. Bennett. And please, please, please follow up and reach out to anybody who's giving you your information. Time is our most valuable resource. And if people are offering that to you and for free, take them up on it. I don't have anything else. John, do you have anything?
I don't. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope this was helpful. And I appreciate the great questions. And again, if I can do anything for any of you, please let me know.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.